We're speaking with Bill Pound, Executive Director of the National Conference of State Legislatures, on a variety of topics of special interest to newly elected legislators. Bill, voters in November elected some 6,000 state legislators across the country. Why are legislatures important?
Because they exemplify representative democracy. They are the chief institution in our democratic system, and they embody the voice of the people. Beyond that, legislatures today, I think, are the single most important public policy arena in the country. In a time when the federal government has been gridlocked, as it were, the bulk of our major public policy issues come out of the state legislature and are resolved there.
You are the Executive Director of NCSL. What does the organization do for legislators, and why should they care about it?
Well, we provide a range of services to the 50 state legislatures and to legislative staff. We engage in a major information sharing, one of the largest and I think a high quality website, prevent the reinvention of the wheel, as it were, in the 50 states. We advocate for state legislatures in Washington, D.C., and represent them in a process, a committee process we have, where the legislatures decide what they want vis-a-vis the federal government. We're sort of a two-way information exchange, and we have continually worked to try to improve the operations of state legislatures in the United States and actually in other parts of the world.
Has NCSL's original vision changed through the years?
No, I think primarily it's probably expanded a bit. But we started with the mission to do the things that I just spoke about, particularly the improvement of legislatures, the training of legislative staff, and to some extent legislators in doing their job, particularly developing and embodying the state voice in our federal system, and particularly the state legislative voice, and providing a wide range of services to members. It's changed somewhat in this era of social media and of the much greater demands that exist on state legislatures today than I think did roughly 38 years ago when we were created.
Why is NCSL located in Denver?
Well, a decision was made when the organization was created that it wouldn't be in Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway, so to speak, that it should be located in a state capital, and by a combination of circumstances, Denver was chosen, largely because it was a capital city that had good transportation and communications.
Partisanship is so strong in politics today. Do you see any hope for the parties to come together and find solutions, at least at the state level? And can NCSL play a role in that?
Well, I believe that the parties do come together more often at the state level, certainly in recent years, than they have at the federal level. If you look around, you would see that every state does enact a budget every year. They're required constitutionally to do it, and they do accomplish that, something that we don't always do at the federal level. The states do not deficit spend, and the parties, I think, in spite of partisanship, are in agreement on that. The middle ground in state legislatures, I think, is found much more than it is maybe in our national politics in recent years. What happens to the direction of our national politics and partisanship, I think it's hard to determine right now. But I do believe that state legislatures will still be able to govern and to develop good public policy. If you look around the country, what's happened, say, in 2011 and 2012, the last biennium, I think you could find example after example of that, where in the states where we have divided government, that is, either the houses are controlled by opposing parties or the legislature and the governor may be of different parties, you would see even in those instances, by and large, there, I think, is very successful governing going on.
NCSL advocates for states in Washington, D.C. How effective has the organization been?
Well, we've had a number of successes, some failures. What we've particularly tried to do, I think, can be captured in three things. One, we tend to oppose federal preemption of state authority. And we've had varying success on that over the years, I think. We also tend to be opposed to unfunded federal mandates, in particular mandates where the federal government tells state and local government what they should do. But in particular, mandates that require the expenditure of money and are not accompanied by any resources with which to accomplish them.
Is NCSL a politically partisan organization?
NCSL is a bipartisan organization. The participants in NCSL are the elected legislators and staff, appointed staff, in the country. They are, by and large, almost 100% elected as either Democrats or Republicans. So they're partisans, but the organization itself is bipartisan in its nature. Our governance under our bylaws assures that. The presidency rotates between the two parties on a yearly basis. We have a balance on our governing board and in our officers at all times. We strive very hard to be a bipartisan organization.
Does NCSL write model legislation?
Generally, no, we do not. We take policy positions primarily only on federal-state issues that vis-a-vis the federal government. We do occasionally develop model legislation. The clearest, I think, and probably the most dramatic example in recent years has been the Main Street Fairness Act, which is actually trying to get, has two pieces. It's one, getting federal authority to collect sales tax on internet and electronic commerce, which under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, Congress would have to grant to the states, and removing the obstacles to that for the private sector, in that creating a model that the states can follow, wherein they are, the collection mechanism would be relatively uniform throughout all the states that decide to join the model.
What's the role of legislative staff in NCSL?
Well, NCSL is a unique organization in that staff play a major role in the governance. Our executive committee is 2-to-1 elected legislators to legislative staff, but staff are a member of it. We serve as the professional organization in many ways for legislative staff. They're organized by the function they perform in legislatures. For example, bill drafting or fiscal analysis or research or auditing, that sort of thing. And we do a lot of training programs during the course of a year along those lines. And staff play a very important role in helping us develop our services and providing direction to us.
What advice would you give new legislators?
Well, the first piece of advice that's usually given as they enter any body is learn the rules. That always serves well and will, I think, help them in their career. I think that a second very valuable piece of advice is keep your word. Beyond that, I think they should look at the resources that are there available to them, not only in their own state, the resources of the legislative staff, of the executive branch, of the third house of government as well, of the lobby, but also resources that they can get from organizations like NCSL. In particular, I think we are the premier organization in providing information and assistance to legislators, and they will be better at their job as they take advantage of that.
What's a recent book you've read that you enjoyed?
Well, actually, I've read a couple books. That sounds like a busman's holiday here. A couple books that deal with government recently. The most recent one is The Minnesota Miracle, which is sort of a history of what happened in Minnesota in the 1970s when the legislature enacted many pieces of legislation which are still effective today and have shaped the state. And it places that in a federalism context of the relationship between the national government and the state governments, the state legislature, and I think there are a goodly number of lessons that may be drawn from it for the current time.
Where did you develop your interest in state level politics?
Oh, I've always been interested in politics. I majored in political science. I taught it at one time, and I've always been particularly interested in the legislative branch.
Now, we can't leave you without asking you about the big glass case that's on the wall of your office that's filled with baseballs. Tell us about that.
Well, every year we conduct a legislative summit. It's the largest gathering of legislators and staff in the country every year. And several years ago, members of the staff, unbeknownst to me, got in the habit of having a baseball signed by every plenary session speaker we had. And they were collected around here someplace. And about a year ago, they very nicely gave them to me in that case for display in this office. So there are all sorts of people up there, ranging from pollsters to Bill Gates to all kinds of people that have spoken in prominent roles at our annual meeting.